Hello, friends. Tonight, let us confront the phantom that haunts countless souls. Not some spectral figure lurking in the shadows, but something far more insidious, more pervasive, the relentless hum of worry. It is the silent, unseen antagonist that gnaws at your peace, that whispers doubts into the quiet hours, that shackles your spirit, even when your body yearns for it. Builds fortresses of fear around your heart, brick by silent brick, until you feel utterly besieged, trapped in a cage of your own making, a prisoner to the what, ifs and the could be's. You feel the weight, do you not? The crushing pressure of tomorrow's unknown, the echoes of yesterday's mistakes, the sheer impossibility of the challenges that stand before you today. You strategize, worn down by a war you never truly signed up for, a conflict that feels unwinnable, fought against an enemy that seems to possess endless reinforcements. But what if this entire premise, this deeply ingrained belief that fei must bear the full weight of every battle, every burden, every solitary worry, is fundamentally flawed? What if the struggle you find yourself entangled in is not, and was never meant to be, a world where, in the face of overwhelming odds, a hidden, unstoppable force stands ready to step into the fray on your behalf? A force that has, throughout history, turned impossible situations into breathtaking victories, transforming despair into triumph, fear into unwavering peace. This is not a fable, not a soothing whisper of wishful thinking. This is the profound shattering truth. The battle you face, my friend, is not yours. It is the Lord's, and tonight we will unearth the ancient secrets of how to surrender the burden, how to lay down your weary arms, and truly, profoundly, let God fight your battles. This is the journey from ceaseless striving to profound rest, from consuming anxiety to unshakable peace. This is the story of divine intervention, a narrative woven through the lives of ordinary people, and it begins, as all great transformations do, with a mystery. How do you relinquish control when everything in you screams to grasp tighter? What does it look like when the divine hand moves in the affairs of mortals, not just in ancient scrolls, but here, now in your life? Prepare to witness the impossible. Prepare to rediscover a truth that will change everything. The relentless hum of worry is more than just a feeling. It paints vivid, terrifying pictures of future calamities that rarely come to pass. Yet it drains your present vitality as if they already have. It thrives on uncertainty, feeding on the unknown, growing exponentially in the void of what you cannot control. Think of it as an invisible cage, meticulously constructed around your potential, around your joy, around your very breath. Every anxious thought, it convinces you that vigilance is your shield, that endless strategizing is your sword, that if you simply worry enough, anticipate enough, control enough, you can somehow outmaneuver fate, outwit misfortune, or even outrun the inevitable. But the truth, stark and liberating, is that worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength. It does not solve problems. And against an enemy so cunning, so pervasive, human strength alone is a fragile defense. You try to fight it, don't you? You tell yourself to stop, to calm down, to be rational, but worry laughs, it swells, it mocks your efforts, because it understands a fundamental principle that often escapes us. Some battles are simply not designed for human hands to win. Some conflicts are spiritual in nature, fought in dimension, and in these moments, when the sheer impossibility of your situation presses in, when your resources are depleted and your spirit falters, that is precisely when the true battle is revealed. It is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places, and against such a foe, a different kind of warrior is needed. This is where the ancient narratives of faith transcend mere historical accounts and become living, breathing blueprints for your present struggle. They are not just stories from a distant past. They are demonstrations of a timeless power, a power that waits to intervene in your life right now, tonight. Let us journey back, thousands of years, to a valley steeped in fear. The valley of Elah, picture it, two armies. For 40 days, a monstrous figure emerges from the Philistine ranks, a titan of a man, 9 feet tall, clad in bronze armor, wielding a spear like a weaver's beam. Goliath, his very name, struck terror, his voice a thunderous roar, a taunt that echoed through the valley, paralyzing an entire nation. He defied the armies of Israel, challenged them to send a champion, not the mightiest soldier, not the bravest commander. Fear, a cold, heavy cloak, had fallen upon them all. Each morning the ritual of dread began anew. Goliath would stride forth, his shadow lengthening across the valley floor, his voice booming. "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me, if he is able to fight. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And for 40 days, Israel trembled. 40 days of paralyzing fear, of whispered despair, of a nation held hostage by one man's terrifying presence. What would they do? How could they break free from this siege of the spirit? Their strength, their strategies, their military might, all proved utterly just a youth sent by his father to deliver food to his brothers on the battlefront. David, he heard the taunts, he saw the fear, and he asked a question that cut through the valley's paralysis like a sharp blade. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Imagine the looks he received, the seasoned soldiers, hardened by war, scoffing at this audacious, naive boy. He saw beyond the physical might of Goliath, beyond the overwhelming odds, beyond the suffocating grip of fear. He saw an insult to the very name of God. And he knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that this battle was not a contest of human strength. It was a divine appointment. He went to King Saul, offering to fight the giant. Saul, looking at the boy, offered him his own armor, a massive. He understood that this battle would not be won by conventional means. He needed a different kind of armor, a different kind of weapon. He chose 5 smooth stones from a brook, placed them in his shepherd's pouch, and took his sling in his hand. And with that, David walked towards the giant, Goliath. Seeing the youth, was enraged. He mocked David, cursing him by his God. But David's reply, delivered with a calm conviction that shook the very air, was not a boast of his own ability, but a declaration of divine might. David cried out, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you, and I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." The suspense in that moment must have been unbearable. A boy armed with nothing but a sling and a handful of stones, facing a monstrous warrior, David ran towards Goliath, swift and fearless. He reached into his bag, took out a stone, and slung it with all his might. The stone flew, true and unswerving, and struck Goliath squarely in the forehead. The mighty giant, who had defied armies and mocked God, staggered, then crashed face down to the earth, a sound like a falling tree silence. Then an explosion of sound as the armies of Israel, suddenly freed from their paralysis, let out a mighty shout and surged forward. The Philistines, seeing their champion fallen, broke and fled in terror. The battle was won, but who won it? Was it David's skill with a sling, or was it the power of the living God, channeled through the unwavering faith of a simple shepherd boy? The battle was the Lord's. David was merely. He did not fight Goliath in his own strength. He allowed God to fight through him. This story is not just ancient history, it is a profound lesson for your present struggles. Do you face a Goliath of debt, a Goliath of illness, a Goliath of a broken relationship, a lost job, a crushing anxiety that seems insurmountable? You have tried to fight it with your own slings and arrows, your own strategies and anxieties. What if tonight you were to relinquish your grip on the outcome, step aside from the fray you were never meant to win alone, and allow the true champion to step forward? The principle is simple yet revolutionary. When human strength falters, divine power takes over. The mystery of Goliath's fall was not David's secret weapon, but God's undeniable presence. The suspense was not in faith Goliath would fall, but from a single slingshot to a parting sea to a crumbled wall. The divine pattern reveals itself again and again. Let us shift our gaze to another epic drama, one that speaks of ultimate liberation from an impossible trap. For over 4 centuries, the descendants of Jacob had suffered under the iron fist of Egyptian tyranny. They were slaves, their lives a relentless cycle of brick, making their cries ascended to heaven, a collective lament echoing through the generations. Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler on earth, saw them not as human beings, but as a vast workforce, a means to his imperialistic ends. He hardened his heart, refusing to release them, even after a series of devastating plagues ravaged his land, each one a divine declaration of judgment and power. Finally, after the Israelites, some 2 million strong, began their epic exodus, a long-awaited journey to freedom. Imagine the jubilation, the palpable sense of liberation that swept through the vast multitude as they marched out of Egypt, their oppressors finally vanquished. But the euphoria was short. Lived Pharaoh, once again, hardened his heart. Fueled by rage and a desire for vengeance, he assembled his chariots, his elite warriors, the full might of the Egyptian army, and pursued the fleeing Israelites. The chase was relentless, the thundering hooves of the chariots growing louder with every passing moment. And then they arrived at a place where escape seemed utterly impossible. Before them, the vast, churning expanse of behind them, the dust cloud of Pharaoh's pursuing army closing in, ready to exact a terrible revenge. They were trapped, hemmed in. A people freed only moments ago now faced certain annihilation. Panic erupted. The Israelites cried out to Moses, their leader, their voices a symphony of terror and despair. They accused him, saying, "Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the... Did we not tell you in Egypt, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Their faith, so recently rekindled, evaporated in the face of insurmountable odds. Their fear was rational. From a human perspective, there was no way out. They were utterly, completely trapped. But Moses, burdened by the immense and God's response was not a strategy meeting, not a complex tactical plan. It was a simple, profound command. "Why do you cry to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward. As for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, and the sons of Israel shall go through the midst of the sea on dry land. And behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will enter after them, and I will be honored. Then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, when I am honored over Pharaoh, over his chariots and over his horsemen." Think of the audacity of that command, "Go forward into the sea." With Pharaoh's army bearing down, Moses without hesitation obeyed. He lifted his staff, stretching his hand over the churning waters, and then, a sight that defied all natural law, a powerful east wind began to blow. The waters began to part, slowly at first, then majestically, forming 2 towering walls of water, a watery canyon, revealing a dry path through the very heart of the sea. Imagine the scene: 2 million people, livestock, possessions, walking on dry ground where moments before there had been only ocean. The walls of water stood on either side, immense, shimmering, a testament to raw divine power. The Pharaoh, blinded by his pride and rage, saw the open path not as a miracle, but as an opportunity. He commanded his chariots to follow, to drive into the very corridor of divine intervention. The Egyptian army, thinking they had trapped their prey, plunged into the dry seabed between the towering walls of water. They pursued, their wheels beginning to stick in the soft ground. A growing sense of unease "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may come back over the Egyptians, over their chariots, and over their horsemen." Moses obeyed, and with a roar that must have shaken the heavens, the walls of water crashed down, engulfing Pharaoh and his entire army, leaving not a single one alive. The sea that had been their salvation became their enemy's tomb. The Israelites stood on the opposite. They sang a song of praise, a triumphant anthem of deliverance. They had witnessed the impossible. They had seen God fight their battle, turning an inescapable trap into a highway of freedom, transforming their pursuers into a forgotten memory beneath the waves. The suspense in this narrative is profound. It is not about they will escape, But Fei-hole human avenues are closed. It reveals a pattern when your path is blocked, when the enemy is at your heels, and there is literally nowhere else to go. That is precisely when God reveals his most spectacular power. Your Red Sea moment may not be a physical body of water. It might be a mountain of debt that feels impassable. It might be a diagnosis that leaves you breathless. It might be a relationship that seems irrevocably broken, or a career you are tempted to despair, to believe that you are destined to be swallowed by your circumstances. But just as with the Israelites, you are being called to do something counterintuitive, to go forward into the seemingly impossible, not by your own strength, but by trusting in the one who can part any sea, dissolve any barrier, and make a way where there is no way. Let God fight your Red Sea battles. Let him. This is not passive waiting. It is active trust, a profound surrender that allows the divine to operate in ways you could never conceive. The mystery is not in the problem itself, but in the miraculous solution only God can provide. Moving forward, let's consider a city, ancient and impregnable, its walls towering, seemingly unassailable. Jericho, a city of immense strategic importance. After 40 years of wandering, the Israelites, led by Joshua, finally stood on the cusp of their inheritance. But first, Jericho. How do you conquer a city whose walls are described as being so thick that houses were built into them? A city designed to withstand prolonged sieges, a symbol of human strength and defiance. From a military standpoint, it was an overwhelming challenge. Conventional warfare dictates, but God's ways are not man's ways. His strategies defy human logic, challenge our preconceived notions of power and might. He gave Joshua a series of commands so bizarre, so utterly contrary to military common sense, that they must have tested the faith of every man present. The command for 6 days the armed men, followed by 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets of ram's horns, were to march around the city once. No shouts, no war cries, no direct attack, just silent, methodical marching. And on the 7th day, a radical shift. They were to march around the city 7 times, and when the priests sounded a long blast on their trumpets, and the people heard the sound, they were to shout a great shout, and then the walls of Jericho would fall flat. Imagine the scene, the disciplined Israeli army, the rhythmic tramp of feet, the solemn presence of the ark, the haunting sound of the trumpets on the 7th day, and the people of Jericho, peering down from their formidable walls, must have been utterly bewildered. What kind of army was this? Was it a psychological tactic? A bizarre ritual? They watched, perhaps mocked, perhaps grew increasingly unnerved by the sheer strangeness of it all. The Israelites marching in silent obedience, their faith tested with every silent step. The mystery of the plan, the puzzle of how such a ridiculous strategy could possibly work, hanging heavy in the air. 6 days of silent circumnavigation, the suspense builds not through conflict, but through anticipation. What would happen? Would anything happen? Doubt, surely, must have whispered in the hearts of some. The final circuit, the long blast of the ram's horns, and then the command from Joshua, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And the people shouted with a great shout, not a war cry, but a shout of faith, a roar of collective trust in the word of God. And then it happened. The earth trembled. The colossal walls of Jericho, the symbol of impregnable human strength, did not simply crumble, they fell flat. Leaving the city exposed, vulnerable to attack from every direction. The mystery was solved, the puzzle completed. The process was absurd by human standards, but the outcome was undeniable. The victory was God's. It was not won by siege engines or ladders or brute force. It was won by obedience and faith, by a strategy that deliberately removed human might from the equation, the stubborn habits, the deep-seated fears, the systemic injustices that stand as barriers to your peace and progress. You have probably tried to scale them, to chip away at them, to ram them down with your own limited strength. And perhaps you have found, like the Israelites, that some walls will only fall when a higher power intervenes. The call to action is not to fight harder, but to obey more, to march in faith, to sound the trumpet of your prayer, and to shout with a confident expectation that the battle is the Lord's, and he will bring down your Jericho walls. Let God fight your Jericho battles. His ways are higher than your ways, and his power knows no bounds. This is about recognizing that sometimes the only way to victory is through humble, obedient surrender, allowing God to perform the miraculous. It is about letting... Now, let us turn our attention to an unlikely hero, a man whose faith was initially riddled with doubt, yet through whom God would perform one of the most astonishing victories against overwhelming odds. The Midianites, along with the Amalekites and other eastern peoples, had ravaged Israel for 7 years. They swept through the land like locusts, destroying crops, stealing livestock, leaving the Israelites in... The people had retreated to mountain dens and caves, living in constant fear, their spirits broken. It was a time of immense oppression, a period when the very survival of Israel seemed precarious. Into this despair stepped Gideon, a man found threshing wheat in a winepress, hiding from the Midianites. He was a man filled with fear and doubt, deeply aware of his own insignificance. When an angel of the Lord appeared to him, addressing him as a mighty warrior, Gideon's response was a litany of his weaknesses. "O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." He was an ordinary man burdened by an extraordinary call. But God saw not Gideon's current fear, but his potential for faith. God commanded him to raise an army, a formidable force, one might think, against the Midianite horde, which numbered 135,000 warriors, spread out like a vast, terrifying blanket across the valley. But here, the divine strategy takes a turn that defies all human military logic. God declares to Gideon, "The people who are with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hands, for Israel would vaunt themselves against me, saying, 'God in his infinite wisdom knew that if Israel won with such a large army, they would attribute the victory to their own strength, their own numbers, their own military prowess. The glory which belonged to him alone would be stolen.' So God instructed Gideon to send home all who were fearful and trembling. Immediately, 22,000 men departed, leaving Gideon with a mere 10,000. Still too many, God declared. Those who knelt to drink were sent home. Only those who lapped the water from their hands, remaining vigilant, were kept. This seemingly arbitrary test reduced the army to a paltry 300 men. 300 men against 135,000. The odds were now so astronomically against them that any rational military commander would have deemed the mission suicidal. Imagine the suspense, the growing apprehension among Gideon's remaining 3. But Gideon, his faith steadily growing through these seemingly bizarre trials, understood. This was not about numbers, it was about divine power. God had deliberately stripped away every human advantage, ensuring that when victory came, it would be undeniably his. The strategy God gave Gideon for the attack was as unconventional as the army's size. Each man was given a trumpet, an empty jar. Then, at a prearranged signal from Gideon, they were to shatter their jars, reveal their torches, and blow their trumpets, shouting, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The night was thick with tension. The 300 men crept into position, the vast Midianite camp spread before them, its thousands of sleeping warriors unaware of the bizarre, terrifying awakening that awaited them. 300 trumpets blared, 300 jars shattered simultaneously, revealing 300 blazing torches in the dark. The shout, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon," echoed through the valley. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Midianites. Waking suddenly in the dead of night to the sound of trumpets, the crash of breaking pottery, and the sight of torches appearing from all directions, they were thrown in. They believed they were surrounded by an immense army, much larger than 300 men. In their terror and confusion, they began to turn their swords on each other, slaughtering their own ranks. The Bible describes how every man's sword was against his comrade throughout the camp. The Midianites fled in a panicked, disorganized rout, pursued by the reassembled forces of Israel. The victory was total. The mystery of how 300 could defeat 135,000 was revealed not in human might, but in divine strategy and intervention. The process was bizarre, the outcome undeniable. The battle was the Lord's. This story profoundly challenges our reliance on conventional solutions. How often do we feel outnumbered, outmatched, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of our problems? But sometimes God's answer is to strip away, to reduce, to demonstrate that his power is made perfect in weakness. Your Gideon battle might be a sense of insignificance in the face of a massive goal, a feeling of being too small, too weak, too unqualified to achieve something profound. It might be a situation where you feel completely outnumbered by circumstances or opposition. The call here is to trust God's unconventional methods. Let him show you that his strength is more than enough, even when you feel you have nothing. This is about embracing divine strategy over human logic, allowing your weakness to become a canvas for his extraordinary power. It is about realizing that the victory is already assured when God steps into the fray, and your role is simply to be obedient. Now, let us turn to stories of extraordinary divine protection, narrative. These are not battles of armies, but battles of faith against tyrannical power, where the outcome seems predetermined by the forces of this world. Consider the three young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, exiled Jews in Babylon. They held positions of authority under King Nebuchadnezzar, but they held something far more precious, an unwavering devotion to the one true God. When King Nebuchadnezzar erected a colossal golden idol and commanded all officials to bow down and worship it at the sound of music, these three men respectfully but firmly refused. Their conscience, their covenant with God, would not allow them to participate in idolatry. The king, consumed by rage, had them brought before him. He offered them another chance, a final opportunity to comply, accompanied by a dire threat. The furnace was so hot, in fact, that the mighty men who threw them in were consumed by the flames themselves. Imagine the scene, the roaring fire, the king's furious decree, the immense pressure to conform, to simply bow their knees for a moment and save their lives. But their response, delivered with serene courage, defied all expectations. O Nebuchadnezzar, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. This was not a demand for rescue. It was a declaration of ultimate loyalty, a profound act of surrender to God's will, even unto death. The king's fury exploded. The furnace was superheated, its flames licking high. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, bound hand and foot, were hurled into the inferno. The doors slammed shut. From a human perspective, their story was over. Another casualty of faith, another testament to absolute power. But then, the king, peering into the flames, cried out in astonishment. They confirmed it, he then exclaimed, "Look! I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." The mystery was solved. The impossible was revealed. God himself, or an angel representing him, had entered the furnace with them. The fire which consumed their captors had no power over them. It merely burned away their bonds, leaving them free. They emerged from the furnace without a trace of harm, not a hair singed, their clothes untouched, no smell of smoke upon them, a tangible, undeniable miracle. The battle was fought and won in the heart of the fire. And what about Daniel? Another exile in Babylon, who rose to great prominence under King Darius. Daniel, too, was a man of unwavering faith, committed to his jealous rivals seeking to destroy him, manipulated the king into issuing a decree. For 30 days, anyone who prayed to any god or human other than the king would be thrown into the lion's den. They knew Daniel's devotion. They knew he would not compromise. Daniel, knowing full well the decree had been signed, did not waver. He went home, opened his windows toward Jerusalem, and 3 times a day knelt. He continued his practice, his private act of devotion now a public defiance of an unjust law. His accusers immediately reported him to the king. Darius, distressed by his own unwitting trap, tried desperately to find a way to save Daniel, but the law of the Medes and Persians was immutable. With a heavy heart, the king ordered Daniel to be cast into the lion's den. As Daniel was thrown in, Darius spoke words that revealed a glimmer of hope, a desperate prayer. "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." A stone was placed over the mouth of the den, sealed with the king's own signet ring and the signet rings of his nobles, ensuring no one could intervene. The night that followed must have been agonizing for Darius. He spent it fasting, sleepless, with no entertainment. The mystery of his survival lay not in his own strength, but in the divine intervention promised to those who trust. At the first light of dawn, the king rushed to the lion's den, his voice trembling as he cried out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" And from the darkness of the den, a calm, clear voice responded, "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him. And also toward you, O king, I have committed no crime." The suspense was broken, the puzzle resolved. Daniel was alive, unharmed. God had fought his battle, sending an angel to muzzle the ferocious beasts. The very next day, Darius commanded Daniel to be lifted from the den, and those who had falsely accused him, along with their families, were cast into the den and immediately devoured by the hungry lions. The king then issued a new decree proclaiming the greatness of Daniel's God throughout his vast empire. These stories of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel are powerful testaments to divine protection in the face of your fiery furnace may not be literal flames. It might be the burning intensity of criticism, the scorching heat of a public scandal, the overwhelming pressure of an impossible deadline. Your lion's den may not be literal beasts. It might be the voracious appetite of addiction, the destructive roar of depression, the crushing weight of legal battles, or the betrayal of trusted friends. You feel cornered, helpless, but these narratives reveal that when you stand firm in your faith, when you refuse to compromise your integrity, when you commit your way to God, He Himself steps into the fire with you, into the den with you. He is the fourth man in the flames, the angel who shuts the lions' mouths. The battle for your very survival, for your peace, for your reputation, for your well-being, is His. And He is a warrior unparalleled. Let Him show you that His protective power transcends all earthly threats, all human limitations. This is about stepping into the impossible with quiet confidence, knowing that you are never truly alone, and that your ultimate defender is sovereign over all circumstances. So, what does it truly mean? Then, to stop worrying and let God fight your battles tonight. It is in fact one of the most active, courageous, and profound acts of faith you can undertake. It is a radical surrender of control, an acknowledgement that your finite strength, your limited perspective, your constant striving are not enough to win the wars that truly matter. It means recognizing that the burdens you carry, the anxieties that consume you, are often symptoms of a deeper struggle, the struggle to fully. It means to cease the frantic strategizing, the endless